Welcome to Lead Your Life, the podcast for people who are seeking harmony in business and in life. My name is Debbie Heiser, and I'm an inner mastery and business mindset coach and the chief igniter here at the Lit Up Life. I feel an urgency to help people let go of past messaging so that they can make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what they value most. Welcome. We're glad you're here.
Straight from the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity. It's a place.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. My name is Debbie Heiser. I help entrepreneurs get really crystal clear on what they want their life to look like, and then help them make that dream come true by using the business as a catalyst to make that happen. So part of what I do is help people make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them. So let's dig in today. I am going to talk about roles that we've been conditioned for and how this plays into what we do, how this plays into how we show up in relationships, how we show up in life. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of this concept of the hats that we wear, how our inner family, our own worst critic happens, how sometimes we do self-imposed pressure. There's a lot of men and women that I've talked to in business and in life that are afraid that, maybe they're supposed to contribute more to the financial means of the household, but they're implying that pressure versus asking their spouse or partner if that's in fact, the case. So we're going to talk through some of that a little bit, as well as how a lot of these things fall into us judging ourselves or others. And how can we look through the lens of curiosity at ourselves? And do that in a way that keeps our vibrational energy high, that we don't end up in this guilt and shame spiral. So that's really what we're going to talk about today. So thank you for joining us. I'm so grateful that each of you are here. So let's talk about that. As women, I don't know about you, but I feel like I wear a lot of hats, right? That some are hats I choose to put on, and I'm not a victim, so I don't mean to think that like these hats are placed on me, but I've chosen to accept these hats. And sometimes try to wear these hats to the nth degree, right? So some hats that I wear, I'm a business owner. I'm the sole provider for myself. I actually was the breadwinner for 30 years in a marriage and continue to do that. Doesn't mean that, if somebody else wants to come along and take care of things financially, I'm way happy with that. But right now, like, that's a hat I wear. I'm a mother, right? I have a 32-year-old son. My hat as that mother and the responsibilities of that have shifted and changed, and sometimes been very easy and other times been difficult. And I will say, like, this hat, particularly for me, was hard in the realm of when my son started to become an adult, right? He would come to me, ask me questions when he went to go make big decisions, wanting another set of eyes on things, so on and so forth. And then he got married, and I'm no longer the only woman in his life, right? And, you know, I- I'm not ashamed to say this. When I look at it, I look at it now with the lens of curiosity. It was interesting how this showed up, that, I didn't want to be alone, like internally, deep internally. And here I was, recently divorced. My son had recently gotten married, and I love my daughter-in-law, and I think she loves me too. And but this hat of being a mother changed, right? And so I'm not going to be a part of his life every day. And I know I have friends that they are a part of their children's lives still into their adulthood every day. I have other people I know that they don't happen to live next to their or by um their, I almost said siblings. That's not what I meant. They don't live next to their children or their offspring, or even in the same town, and they may talk on the phone once a week or something, but they're not a part of that day-to-day life necessarily. So, this desire to want to be more a part of their life, but then also realizing in a mature adult situation I'm talking about the committee in our head, this mature adult said, I shouldn't be a part of their life every day, right? Like I do see them probably once, maybe even twice a week. And the other hat that I have is that I'm a gaga. I'm a grandma. And so getting to spend time with my grandson, and I have a new grandson that by the time you are listening to this will have been here, and if not, my daughter-in-law is going to be on a rampage. But anyway, like that hat is completely different. Now, would I love to spend time with him every day? Absolutely. But knowing too that I get to go do some of these fun things, and anyway, like these hats are different, and I get a lot of joy out of spending time with my grandson. So that's a cup filler for me. I wear the hat of a friend. I have a lot of people that are what I say quarter friends, right? And then some that are dime friends, meaning that that's that closer inner circle. And I share differently with each type of person that I'm around, and has nothing to do with the person so much, but there are certain things that maybe we have more in common or whatever. And so I wear that hat of a friend. And then I have my best friends, the ones that know the inner pieces of me and have stuck around, right? And not judged me for who I am. So there's a lot of hats, right? You might be a career woman. I know I was for many years. I was a youth pastor for many years. And, these things that we do. Now, the other hat that I like to think about is this idea of us being. Like, who are we being? That is a hat that I wear. Like, I try to be honest and have integrity. I try to be transparent with people. I try to show up in my authenticity. And sometimes the reason I say try is because sometimes I'm still figuring out who I am. So I may not be able to share a certain part with you just because I'm not quite sure yet what that looks like for me. I know after I got divorced, it was, kind of figuring out who I was not being married. That's a different, it's just different. And I had more freedom. I felt like I had been repressed for a lot of years. And so that hat became different, right? So anyway, I try to be honest, transparent, so on and so forth. So there's also hats that we wear about how we're being in the world. When I go to social functions, I'm being the extrovert because I do love to be extroverted. I gain energy from being around people. And so I'm super curious and I'll talk to a lot of people. Then there's other times that I'm just quiet. And so those hats are also hats that we wear, not only in the doing, but the being. So I want you to think about, what hats do you wear? And part of why I ask you to take a moment to list those down is some of them we put on. And those are the things that I've talked about before with the vase that we take on that we don't really want to do. And so I tell people the first step to helping you get really clear is, if you feel overwhelmed, if you feel like you have too much on your plate, to list out all the things you're involved in, all the hats that you're wearing, and then go through and highlight the ones that bring you joy. Highlight the ones that fill your energy bucket, and then cross out the ones that are sucking energy from you or that are taking time that it's not fun anymore. Now, there are things that we do that aren't always fun. I don't mean it that way. But if you're volunteering for something, my ex-husband said this to me one time, if you're volunteering for this and you are stressed out about it and it makes you feel super icky, then you really have to look at that and say, is that something I want to continue to do? And I would say that about anything, even, hopefully you listened to my podcast about being hit over the head by a 2x4. Even my business and how it was going, I changed that up because it just wasn't in alignment. So look through those hats that you wear, determine which ones are in alignment with who I am, which ones are not. Then as you do that, try really hard not to filter. Right? When I hear people say I'm my own worst critic, I think, oh, their internal family, because we have our little girl, or little boy, whoever you are, they, whatever, your little person has all emotion. Your adolescent has the resiliency, but they're the ones that get burned out. Then you've got your critical parent, and I'm not talking your particular parent, although that face might be on that person, but it is you being your own critical parent. Like whenever you say, I should be doing this, I always ask the question, according to whom? Because that's judgment, right? So as we look at this, if you say I'm my own worst critic, I would say really take a look at how you're beating yourself up for things and self-implying pressure, self-implying expectations that may or may not be expectations that people have of you. And if in fact they're your own expectations, where is that coming from? Right? Like I realized my dad, I love him. He's a good man, but it's a good example, is someone that constantly sees the one thing that's not great, right? And he used to praise us, my sisters and I, on our achievements. So therefore, I equated in my mind that achievement equaled love. So I continue to go into this world sometimes with an achievement orientation, not bad. I'm not judging it, but I go there and it's good in some cases, but just like a fear of heights is good if you're standing on the top of a building, a tall building, but maybe doesn't serve you as well if you're too afraid to get on an elevator. Now, if you're too afraid to get on an elevator because it's a small confined space, whatever, that's different, right? And so looking at this and these self-imposed pressures that you're putting on yourself and these expectations, you really have to step back then and say, where is that expectation coming from? Many times it is coming from messages that you have received growing up, messages that, I mean, I've received messages through my religion. I've interpreted things a certain way or had other people interpret them, and I took that on. There are messages coming at us all the time in the media, in social media. You know, somebody was telling me the other day, now I haven't looked this up, so don't quote this, but that there was an article out there talking about the level of anxiety and depression increasing, and they're seeing this as a direct relationship to social media, right? And the comparison game that people put on themselves. So looking at that, trying not to show up in judgment of yourself or of other people, because when I'm judging other people, I'm also judging myself. Are you a woman who's worn out from wearing all the hats that we wear and you're really ready for a break? Well, join us for an empowering experience in beautiful Sandpoint, Idaho from October 24th to the 27th. This exclusive retreat is designed for women just like you. The Cast Your Vision retreat will have transformative workshops, expert guidance and coaching from me, and a supportive community to hold your hand along the way. Don't miss this opportunity to invest in yourself and your future. Get crystal clear on who you want to be and make that dream into a reality. Register today with the link in the show notes. Hope to see you there. So how do we do this? How do we look at this through the lens of curiosity and not go into judgment, into that critical parent that then has our vibration lowering, where we get into this, sense of almost sometimes depression because, of what's happening. So first of all, I always tell people, step back and say, how did I get into this situation? Without judgment, just saying, okay, I want to identify what's the pattern. What's the thing that got me into this? For those of you that listen to I got hit by a 2x4, I was trying to build a big corporation and I left corporate America for a reason. Well, it was just a habit. It was a pattern that I was familiar with. And so that was a great awareness for me, but it wasn't an alignment. So just say to yourself, how did I get into this situation? And then being very careful to take ownership, but not to the point where you completely battle yourself to death, right? But like, because we are our own co-creators. And if we blame someone else for a situation that we're in, we're not taking accountability for that, right? And this is subtle stuff sometimes. And it's so important when this happens, not to judge yourself for it. Just kind of look at it, because awareness is the first step to making change, to transforming. And once you're aware, you can't go back. So then you become aware of this, and you're going to hear me say this 2 or 3 times throughout this. Don't care what other people think. Like when you start getting into this, I'm worried about what other people will think of me. That's when things go to hell in a handbag because then you're not showing up authentically. And I get it, right? Like the other day I posted something on social media about some of the things coming up in well, this project 2025, right? And I wasn't saying to people like, here's my interpretation of it. I was saying, go out and read it, interpret it for yourself, right? I didn't really care what other people thought. And honestly, everybody was stayed pretty kind in it because that's the type of people I attract. So don't care what other people think, right? Like it's not important. And I think about, even if you don't come from, I talk a lot about universe, for me, it's God, but even if you don't come from a biblical connotation, many people have heard the story about Noah and how everyone thought he was nuts. And he built this huge ark. He listened to his intuition. He said, I'm going to build this big ark. I'm being told to prepare for the fact that we're going to have so much rain. And part of that preparation is to bring animals onto this ark, and save some of these land animals, blah, blah, blah. He didn't really care what other people thought. They all made fun of him. And then all the rain started and they all wished that they would have been friends with him, right? Or married to one of his sons or daughters. So don't care what other people think, right? Your intuition is telling you something, your mind, and trust that because we are taught not to trust our intuition. So then step back too and say, what's the growth edge here? What's the universe trying to teach me? What am I learning? And inevitably, every situation I've ever been in, I've been able to take that situation and potentially offer up some help just by sharing what has occurred with me to other people. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I'm just showing this as an example. Like I get texts all the time or Facebook messages that say, hey, I so appreciated this podcast or I so appreciated this post. I'm in the middle of a whole bunch of stuff and this just always speaks to me right at the right moment. I had no idea. Right. So, I mean, I appreciate that people send that to me, but my point is there is a growth edge. The universe is trying to teach you something, or have you learned something in this journey that you're on? So ask yourself, what might be the growth edge? And sometimes with a safe person that understands what you mean with this, it's good to have this conversation with someone else to get a different perspective, or with a coach, right? The other thing I ask is, what's the miracle out of this? And when I can get into a place where I am grateful, like I was so grateful that I got sick because it felt like I just released a bunch of tension. And then the second sickness that I got a week later felt like I was releasing things in my body that had been in my body for years. And I can't describe it, nor is this the time or place to do that. But like it just felt like there were things that were pent up in me that I had not let go of, that I was letting go of. So I am so grateful for that happening. So when you can get to a point where even something that feels like it's really terrible, that you can see something that you're grateful for about it, or that there's some kind of miracle that happens from this. Like, would I love to have my mom here? Absolutely. So I'm not, like, I, I would take her back in a heartbeat, right? Like, so I'm not saying like when I'm looking at this miracle that if I could change that up and have her be here, I would. But what I'm saying about this is I saw this as a miracle because the service sorority she was a part of in Kansas City put together a scholarship in her name, and there were a dozen or more people that were given a really nice scholarship because my mom valued education so much, and those people's lives have now been impacted in a positive way even after my mom had left her body, right? Like, and so I found I was really grateful for the things that I've learned from her. I was grateful and saw the miracle in how she was continuing to positively impact people even after she was gone. So that's what I mean, like thinking about, and sometimes it takes a little time to get to that, right? And I'm not saying don't feel the feels. Feel the feels, because if you don't, it comes up in a different way sometimes than what you want it to. So feel the feels, but look for what the miracle is or what you're grateful for. And some of this I've talked about in the law of increase or expansion, But the other piece to look at this with the lens of curiosity is then say to yourself, what would it take to have X, Y, and Z? What would it take to get to this different point, right? Like if I'm in this situation right here at point A, what would it take to get to point B? And then having the faith that when you take that first step, you may not know step 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, but knowing that when you took the first step, that's the hardest, and that the next step will appear, right? Like it will come to you. But again, it's that trusting the intuition. For me, it's intuition and foresight and the Holy Spirit, right? Like, and trusting that, that's the big piece. That is a huge piece of what our roles that we've been conditioned not to trust our own self. And then again, don't care what other people think, right? Get out of the comparison game, get out of this fear of what someone might think about who you are when you're your authentic self. Because I'm here to tell you, most of the people that I talk to that are the happiest, that have the most peace in their life, and we all have peace and we all have happiness today in our life, but those people, they're still doing the work as far as like digging around in their emotions, digging it around and, like what the situation is, how they got there, what's the miracle to this. They're still doing those things because life is life. But the way they go about it keeps them in a state of being peaceful, right? It doesn't mean that they don't have stress. It doesn't mean that they don't have blips of things. But if what you want is freedom, as far as from the chains of expectation around you, or any of these things that have been self-implied, that are all messages that we have heard and our subconscious takes in as a belief. Now, I've talked about those before with the whole like brain science piece, but that's what this is really about. And the next episode, we're going to talk a lot about belief and believing in yourself and how that makes all the difference in the world. So thank you so much for listening. I so appreciate it. And with that, folks, it's a wrap. Have a great one. That's a wrap for this conversation. I'm so glad you've joined us. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you can catch all of our future episodes, and visit us at thelituplife.com for details on how you can become part of the Lit Up Life community. A quick shout out to my friend Jackie Wilson and her friends, the creators of our amazing theme music. Thanks so much for allowing us to share this perfect song with our listeners. Looking forward to having you listen in to our next episode.